Ever feel like you're standing on the edge of something amazing? You know that feeling, but you just can't bring yourself to take that leap.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into Mel Robbins' The 5-Second Rule today
Okay.
to explore how a simple countdown can help you unlock the courage to transform your life.
You know, it's fascinating because this rule isn't just some motivational fluff. It's grounded in neuroscience
Yeah.
and backed by real-life examples of people who've used it to make significant changes.
And get this, the idea was sparked by a rocket launch on TV.
Wow.
Mel Robbins was struggling with some major life challenges and saw this rocket blasting off,
Right.
and it clicked for her.
Yeah.
The countdown, that sense of urgency,
Yeah.
could be a tool to break free from inertia.
What's key here is that it's not about waiting for motivation to strike. It's about understanding how our brains work. You see, when you have an instinct to act,
Yeah.
you have a tiny window, about 5 seconds,
5 seconds.
to physically move.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your brain steps in with doubts, fears, and
Okay,
excuses.
So it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, J.
Exactly.
And then move E
Yes.
before your brain can talk you out of it.
Precisely. The countdown acts as a circuit breaker,
Okay.
interrupting that automatic response of hesitation
Uh-huh.
and engaging the prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
which is like the command center for decision-making and action.
So it's less about feeling brave
That's right.
and more about outsmarting your own brain.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that instinctive part of you that knows what you want
Right.
and then taking action before the fear and uncertainty take over.
Okay. So we've got the rule itself,
Okay.
but how does it actually work in practice? The book is full of inspiring stories.
It is, take Mel's own story, for example.
Right.
She was feeling overwhelmed and stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
But that 5-second decision to get out of bed when her alarm went off led to a cascade of positive changes. What's interesting is that it wasn't about a sudden burst of willpower.
Right.
It was about creating a new habit loop, training her brain to respond differently to that initial urge to hit the snooze button.
So this could be applied to all sorts of things, from tackling that daunting project
Yeah.
to finally having that difficult conversation you've been putting off.
Absolutely. The book highlights how this rule can be used in all sorts of situations.
Yeah.
One particularly compelling example is Rosa Parks' historic decision to stay seated on that bus.
Oh, wow.
It was a small act of defiance,
Right.
fueled by her instinct to stand up for what she believed in.
That's a powerful example of how a seemingly small action can have a huge impact,
Absolutely.
especially when it's driven by a deep sense of purpose.
Exactly. And the book also discusses how Steve Wozniak almost let fear and uncertainty stop him from co-founding Apple.
Real?
It was that push to take action, to trust his instincts,
Yeah.
that ultimately led to the creation of something extraordinary.
What strikes me about these stories is that courage isn't about being fearless.
Right.
It's about recognizing that fear is a natural response,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to control us.
That's such a crucial point. The book emphasizes that fear and excitement
Okay.
often trigger similar physical responses. It's our interpretation,
Right.
the label we put on that feeling,
Mhm.
that determines whether we see it as something to avoid or an opportunity to embrace.
It's like that feeling you get when you have a near miss on the highway.
Oh, yeah.
Your heart races,
Yeah.
your palms sweat.
Right.
But it's also a jolt of adrenaline that can help you focus and react quickly.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And Mel Robbins suggests that we can actually reframe anxiety as excitement.
Okay.
Instead of getting caught up in the worry,
Yeah.
what if we channel that energy into positive action?
So it's about shifting our perspective
Yes.
and recognizing that we have a choice
Yeah.
and how we respond to those
Right.
feelings.
Exactly. There's a story in the book about how Mel used this technique while dealing with pre-wedding jitters.
Uh-huh.
Instead of letting the anxiety overwhelm her,
Right.
she used the 5-second rule to shift her focus to gratitude and excitement.
That's a great example of how we can actually train our brains to respond differently to challenging situations.
Yeah.
It's not about ignoring the fear.
Right.
It's about choosing how we engage with it.
Absolutely.
So we've seen how the 5-second rule can help us tackle those big life-changing moments.
Yeah.
But what about applying this to our everyday interactions?
That's where it gets really interesting. The book highlights the power of small gestures, those seemingly insignificant acts of courage that can have a ripple effect in our relationships.
You mean like reaching out to a friend who's going through a tough time?
Yeah.
Or sending a quick text to let someone know you're thinking of them?
Exactly. It's about acting on those impulses to connect, to express kindness, even when it feels a bit awkward or uncomfortable. We often overthink these things.
Yeah.
But the 5-second rule encourages us to just go for it.
because that hesitation, that little voice that says, maybe I shouldn't bother, can really hold us back from building meaningful connections.
Absolutely. And it's not just about reaching out to others. The book also explores how we can use this rule to break free from our own negative habits and create positive ones.
This is where I struggle. I'm a master procrastinator. Does the book offer any hope for people like me?
It does, and it starts by challenging the traditional idea of willpower. Mel Robbins argues that willpower alone isn't enough to overcome ingrained habits because our brains are wired to resist change.
So it's not just about trying harder.
Not exactly. It's about understanding the science behind habit formation and using that knowledge to our advantage.
Right.
Remember the basal ganglia we talked about earlier?
Uh-huh.
That part of the brain that's responsible for automatic responses.
Right.
Well, when we try to break a habit, the basal ganglia kicks in, trying to pull us back into those familiar patterns.
It's like our brains are on autopilot,
Yeah,
even when we consciously want to do something different.
precisely. And that's where the 5-second rule comes in. It acts as a circuit breaker, interrupting that automatic response and giving us a chance to choose a different course of action.
So if I'm trying to break the habit of hitting the snooze button instead of relying on willpower to drag myself out of bed,
Yeah.
I can use the 5-second rule to jumpstart a new routine.
Exactly. When the alarm goes off, count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then immediately get up and out of bed. It's about taking action before those habitual patterns take over.
I love that idea. It's like outsmarting your own brain.
Yeah.
And speaking of starting the day off, right, the book also talks about the importance of a morning routine.
Right, it does. Mel Robbins emphasizes the transformative power of having a structured morning routine. By waking up early and carving out time for ourselves before the demands of the day kick in, we can set a positive tone for the hours ahead.
She even suggests planning your quitting time.
Yes. It sounds counterintuitive, but by setting a firm end to your workday, you create a sense of urgency and focus that can actually boost your productivity.
So it's about being intentional with our time, recognizing that rest and recharge are just as important as work and productivity.
Absolutely. And it's not just about work-life balance. It's about being fully present in all areas of our lives, whether it's spending time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, or simply taking a few moments for ourselves.
So how do we actually go about creating a morning routine that works for us? Does the book offer any practical tips?
It does. One of the key suggestions is to remove distractions, especially technology. Keep your phone out of reach, don't check emails first thing in the morning, and create a space that's conducive to focus and clarity.
It's about reclaiming those precious morning hours for ourselves, for setting intentions, and for nurturing our well-being.
Exactly. And she also emphasizes the importance of starting small and gradually building up your routine. Don't try to overhaul your entire morning overnight. Instead, focus on incorporating 1 or 2 new habits at a time.
It's all about setting ourselves up for success by creating sustainable changes that we can actually stick with. Okay, so we've talked about using the 5-second rule to boost our productivity and build better habits. But what about those times when we're feeling overwhelmed by anxiety? Can this rule help us navigate those moments?
It absolutely can. Remember, the 5-second rule is all about interrupting those automatic negative thought patterns and shifting our focus to the present moment.
So when anxiety starts creeping in, we can use the countdown to break free from that spiral of worry.
Precisely. Mel Robbins offers some great techniques for reframing anxiety as excitement. She talks about anchoring our thoughts on positive outcomes. For example, if you're nervous about a presentation, instead of dwelling on the fear of failure, focus on the positive impact you want to have on your audience.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to focus on what we can control, which is our effort and intention, rather than getting bogged down by what we can't control, like the outcome.
Exactly. And she also emphasizes the importance of taking action. Often the best way to overcome fear is to simply do the thing that scares us. The more we expose ourselves to situations that trigger anxiety, the more we build up our resilience.
It's like facing a bully. The more you stand up to them, the less power they have over you.
That's a great analogy. And the 5-second rule provides that initial push we often need to get out of our heads and into action.
It's about recognizing that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's about acting despite the fear.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we all experience fear, but we don't have to let it paralyze us. The 5-second rule gives us a tool to interrupt that fear response and choose a different path.
It's like having a secret weapon in our back pocket to combat those moments of self-doubt and hesitation. Now let's talk about another challenge that many of us face in today's world: distractions.
Ah, yes. The constant barrage of information and stimulation that can make it so difficult to focus on what truly matters.
We've been exploring how the 5-second rule can help us overcome fear, build confidence, and create positive change. But sometimes the biggest obstacle isn't external. It's that internal battle with procrastination. We know what we should be doing, but we just can't seem to get ourselves to do it.
You've hit on something so common. It's like there's a disconnect between our intentions and our actions.
Yeah.
The book actually dives into the science behind this, explaining how procrastination isn't just about laziness. It's a complex interplay of emotions and ingrained neural pathways.
So it's not just me being weak-willed. There's actually a neurological reason for this struggle.
There is. Remember the basal ganglia? We talked about the part of the brain responsible for habit formation?
Right.
Well, when we face a task that feels uncomfortable or challenging, the basal ganglia tries to protect us by triggering avoidance behaviors.
So it's like our brains are wired to choose the path of least resistance, even if it means putting off something important.
Exactly. And the 5-second rule can be incredibly effective in disrupting that pattern. By counting down and taking action quickly, we engage the prefrontal cortex, which is the more evolved part of our brain responsible for decision-making and overriding those automatic responses.
So we're essentially hacking our brains to break free from those procrastination loops.
Precisely. It's about training our minds to respond differently to those initial impulses to avoid or delay. And the more we use the 5-second rule, the stronger those neural pathways for taking action become.
This has given me so much hope. It's like having a tool to rewire our responses and become more proactive. But what about those times when procrastination stems from self-doubt?
Yeah.
That feeling of I'm not good enough or I'm going to fail.
The book addresses this head-on, emphasizing that self-doubt is a normal human experience even for highly successful people. It's about recognizing those thoughts as just that thoughts, not facts.
Mel Robbins talks about how we can't always control how we feel, but we can always choose how we act.
Yeah.
This really struck a chord with me. I tend to wait for the right feeling, motivation, inspiration, confidence before starting something.
That's a common trap. But think about professional athletes. They don't wait to feel like training or competing.
Right.
They push themselves even when they're tired or doubtful because they understand that action creates momentum and fuels those positive feelings.
So it's not about waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about taking action and trusting that the motivation will follow.
Exactly. And that's where the 5-second rule can be so empowering. It helps us bridge that gap between thinking and doing, between intention and action.
It's like giving ourselves that little push we need to get out of our own heads and into the world. The book also talks about setting clear goals and intentions. Why is that so important?
Having a clear vision of what we want to achieve provides direction and motivation. Mel Robbins suggests getting specific about our goals and breaking them down into smaller, actionable steps. It's not enough to simply say, I want to be healthier. Define what that means for you. It's about exercising more,
Right.
eating better,
Yeah.
getting more sleep.
So it's about creating a roadmap,
Yeah.
a step-by-step guide,
Yeah.
rather than just a vague desire. And then when we hit those moments of resistance, we can use the 5-second rule to power through and stay focused on the smaller milestones.
You got it. It's about building momentum through consistent action. And speaking of visualization, the book also suggests creating a vision board or a visual representation of our goals and dreams. What do you think about that?
I love the idea. It's like having a tangible reminder of what we're working towards, something to keep us inspired and motivated when things get tough. But one thing that really resonated with me is that the book isn't just about achieving external success. It's about cultivating inner peace and living a life that's aligned with our values.
Absolutely. Mel Robbins emphasizes the importance of self-awareness, mindfulness, and connecting with our authentic selves. She encourages us to pay attention to our instincts, to listen to that inner voice that guides us toward what truly matters.
Sometimes, though, those instincts can lead us to make difficult decisions.
That's true. Mel Robbins shares her own experience of leaving a successful law career to pursue her passion for writing and speaking. It was a huge risk, but she trusted her gut and followed her heart, even though it meant facing uncertainty and stepping outside of her comfort zone.
It's inspiring to see how those leaps of faith can lead to such fulfilling outcomes.
Yeah.
And the 5-second rule can be such a valuable tool for navigating those transitions, those moments when we're called to embrace the unknown.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that growth and change often require us to let go of what's familiar and comfortable and step into the unfamiliar, even if it feels scary at first.
This deep dive has been such an incredible journey. It's amazing how much wisdom and practical advice Mel Robbins has packed into the 5-second rule. It's a reminder that we have the power to create the lives we want, one 5-second decision at a time.
It's a call to action, an invitation to embrace everyday courage and to step into the fullness of our potential.
So what's the one instinct you're ignoring right now? What will you do in the next 5 seconds to change that? The power is within you. The time is now 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.